She stood on the rain-slicked tarmac, the scent of jet fuel and ozone sharp in the cool morning air. In her hand were the keys to a life she had built from nothing. In her pocket, a phone that could command empires. Before her gleamed the polished silver fuselage of a Gulfstream G650ER, a $70 million testament to her success. But the three people guarding the stairs to her aircraft, the crew she paid for, saw none of that. They saw a black woman in a tracksuit, and they saw a mistake. They were about to learn a lesson in power that would cost them everything. But the story doesn't end there. Because when karma comes calling, it doesn't always knock on the door you expect. The world of private aviation is a hermetically sealed universe of quiet luxury and unspoken rules. It exists on the periphery of the bustling commercial world, at exclusive fixed-base operators, FBOs, where the carpets are plush, the coffee is complimentary, and the staff are trained to be ghosts, present but unnoticed. Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, a concrete kingdom of hangars and runways serving the titans of Manhattan, was the apex of this world. And on a dreary Tuesday morning, under a sky the color of wet slate, Dr. Alani Williams was about to discover just how rigidly its gates were kept. Alani had chosen comfort for the 14-hour flight to Tokyo, a simple, well-tailored gray cashmere tracksuit, pristine white sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low over her intricate braids. There was no ostentatious jewelry, no designer handbag screaming its price tag. Her quiet confidence was her only accessory. She was not performing wealth, she possessed it, and the distinction was one she cherished. Her company, Ethelred Analytics, a titan in the predictive AI and fintech sector, was on the verge of a historic merger, and this trip was the final, critical step. Sleep on the plane was paramount. As her black Escalade rolled to a stop beside the gleaming Gulfstream G650ER, registration N7AE, she felt a familiar, quiet thrill. It was her jet, not chartered for the occasion, but owned outright. The N7AE designation was a nod to her company's initials and her lucky number. It was her sanctuary in the sky, her office, her escape. She stepped out, her assistant handling the luggage with the ground crew. Alani walked toward the air stairs, ready to board and sink into the buttery Italian leather of her favorite seat. Three figures stood at the base of the stairs, a formidable human barricade. The man in the center wore the four stripes of a captain on his epaulets. He was tall, with silver hair meticulously combed and a jawline that seemed permanently clenched in mild disapproval. His name tag read, Robert Sterling. To his right, a younger man with two stripes, the first officer, shifted his weight nervously. His name was Frank Miller. And to the left, a flight attendant, Bianca Hayes, stood with a posture so perfect it was aggressive. Her smile was a thin, brittle line, and her eyes, the color of a winter sky, performed a swift, dismissive scan of Alani's attire. "Good morning," Alani said, her voice warm but businesslike. "Ready for the long haul?" Captain Sterling did not return the greeting. He took a half step forward, subtly blocking her path. "Ma'am, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This is a private flight." Alani's brow furrowed slightly. "Yes, I know. It's my flight, to Tokyo." Bianca, the flight attendant, let out a sound that was half laugh, half scoff. She quickly disguised it as a cough, but the contempt was unmistakable. "This aircraft is chartered by Dr. Williams," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "We are waiting for our client." A cold knot of disbelief tightened in Alani's stomach. This isn't happening. Not here, not now. She had dealt with this her entire life. The maitre d' who assumed she was at the wrong table, the sales associate who ignored her in a luxury store, the valet who handed her the keys to a lesser car. But on the tarmac, at the foot of her own multi-million-dollar aircraft, was a new, breathtaking level of audacity. "I am Dr. Williams," Alani stated, her voice losing its warmth and gaining an edge of steel. Captain Sterling's expression didn't flicker. He exchanged a look with Frank Miller, a brief, silent conversation that was loud in its shared prejudice. Miller gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, as if to say, "No way." "With all due respect, ma'am," Sterling said, his tone making a mockery of the phrase, We have a manifest and we have our protocols. We are expecting a very important client. Perhaps you're with the catering service or ground support. If so, you'll need to go back to the FBO and get the proper credentials." The insult hung in the damp air, thick and suffocating. Catering, ground support. He hadn't even considered she could be a passenger, let alone the owner. In his world, a black woman in a tracksuit did not belong in this picture unless she was serving someone. Alani held his gaze, a storm gathering behind her dark eyes. "Captain, let's stop playing games. My name is Alani Williams. I am the owner of this aircraft. My assistant, who you just saw with the luggage, has my passport and all the necessary documentation. I suggest you step aside and let me board my plane." Frank Miller, the first officer, spoke for the first time, his voice nervous but firm. "Ma'am, we can't just let anyone on board. It's a security risk. Captain Sterling is responsible for the safety of this aircraft and its passenger." "I am the passenger." Alani's voice rose, frustration cracking its calm facade. She was a woman who solved intractable data problems for breakfast, who negotiated with global finance ministers, who could command a room of 1,000 engineers with a single sentence. And here she was, arguing about her own identity on a windswept patch of asphalt. Bianca stepped forward, her smile now openly mocking. "Dr. Williams is a very established woman, a pillar of the community. We know who we are waiting for." The implication was clear. You are not her. You could never be her. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread across Alani's cheeks. But beneath it, a cold, hard resolve began to crystallize. She had built her empire by being underestimated, by turning other people's prejudice into fuel. These three people, in their crisp uniforms and smug certainty, had no idea the forces they were aligning against them. "You know what?" Alani said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "You're right. You are responsible for security, and you have failed your first test. You failed to identify the owner of the plane you're being paid a handsome salary to fly." She reached into her pocket, but instead of pulling out an ID, she took out her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen. Captain Sterling crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "Who are you calling?" "The authorities." "Go ahead. They'll confirm we're just doing our job." "No, Captain," Alani said without looking up from her phone. "I'm not calling the authorities. I'm calling your boss." She found the number in her contacts, the direct line for Tom Peterson, the Senior Vice President of Flight Operations at Apex Aviation Services, the management company that handled her jet. She pressed the call button and put it on speaker. The ringing cut through the tense silence. After 2 rings, a man's voice answered, brisk and professional. "Peterson." "Tom, it's Alani Williams." The change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. The crew's smug expressions faltered. Captain Sterling's arms uncrossed, his posture becoming less defiant, more rigid. "Dr. Williams, good morning. Is everything all right? I see you're scheduled for Tokyo. Hope you have a wonderful flight." "That's what I'm calling about, Tom," Alani said, her eyes locked on Sterling. "I'm having a bit of an issue boarding my plane." There was a moment of confused silence on the other end of the line. "An issue? What sort of issue? Is there a problem with the FBO?" "No, the FBO has been wonderful," Alani replied, her voice lethally calm. "The problem is with the crew you've assigned to the N7NE, a Captain Sterling, First Officer Miller, and a flight attendant named Bianca Hayes. They're refusing to let me on my own jet." The silence on the line was now heavy with dread. Alani could practically hear the gears turning in Tom Peterson's head, the calculations of a multi-million-dollar account suddenly in jeopardy. "Refusing you access?" Peterson's voice was a strangled whisper. "Dr. Williams, that's impossible. Let me speak with Captain Sterling immediately." Alani held the phone out. Sterling, his face now pale and ashen, took it with a trembling hand. The bravado had evaporated, replaced by the stark, cold terror of a man realizing he had just made a career-ending mistake. "Tom, sir?" Sterling stammered. The voice that boomed from the speaker was no longer brisk and professional. It was thunderous, a tempest of pure corporate fury. "Sterling, what in the God-loving hell do you think you're doing? That is Dr. Alani Williams. The owner of the damn plane. The woman who signs your paychecks. Are you out of your mind? Sterling flinched as if struck. Sir, she didn't look. We were following security protocols. Protocols? Peterson roared. Your protocol is to greet the client, check their identification respectfully if needed, and welcome them aboard. Your protocol is not to play security theater and insult one of our most valuable clients. You had a picture of her in your flight briefing? Did you even look at it? The blood drained completely from Sterling's face. He had in fact glanced at it. A corporate headshot of a smiling, professionally dressed black woman. He had barely registered it, his mind already filled with a different image of what a Dr. Alani Williams, CEO, should look like. An older white man, perhaps. Maybe a stern, immaculately dressed woman in her late 50s. Not this. Alani watched, her expression unreadable. She felt no triumph, only a deep, weary sadness. This was the tax she paid for her success. The constant, exhausting need to prove she belonged in the spaces she owned. Put Dr. Williams back on the phone, Peterson commanded. Sterling numbly handed the phone back. Alani, Peterson said, his voice now pleading. I am so sorry. This is inexcusable. I am at a loss for words. Please allow me to apologize on behalf of the entire company. Apologies are noted, Tom, Alani said coolly, but actions are what matter. I have a flight to catch. I have $1 billion deal to close, and I will not have my focus compromised by incompetence and prejudice. I don't feel safe flying with this crew. I don't trust their judgment. Of course, Peterson said quickly. Whatever you need. We'll get a new crew out to you immediately. It might take an hour, maybe 90 minutes. That's fine, Alani said. Then she delivered the final blow, her voice clear and unwavering, a judge passing sentence. But I want to be crystal clear about one thing, Tom. I want Captain Sterling, Mr. Miller, and Ms. Hayes permanently removed from my account. In fact, I don't want them working for your company at all. As of this moment, they are fired. The word fired sliced through the damp Teterboro air with the finality of a guillotine. It was not shouted, it was stated, a fact presented without emotion. Yet it landed with the force of a physical blow. For a moment, the only sound was the distant whine of another jet taxiing for takeoff and the tinny, frantic voice of Tom Peterson, still squawking from the phone. Dr. Williams, consider it done. They're gone. Their access cards will be deactivated before you hang up. We'll handle the severance and the paperwork. Their careers with Apex are over. Completely over. Alani ended the call, plunging the tarmac back into a thick, suffocating silence. She looked at the three figures before her, their faces a tableau of shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. Bianca Hayes was the first to break. The mask of icy professionalism shattered, revealing a raw, panicked fear. Fired! You can't do that. It was a misunderstanding. A simple mistake. Her voice was high and shrill, all its cultivated elegance gone. We were just doing our jobs. Your job, Alani corrected, her gaze pinning Bianca in place, was to provide exemplary service to your client. Instead, you chose to indulge in cheap, ugly stereotypes. You judged me on my clothes and the color of my skin, not my credentials. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a failure of character. Frank Miller, the first officer, looked like he was going to be sick. He was younger than the other two, and a flicker of genuine remorse, or perhaps just self-preservation, crossed his face. Ma'am, Dr. Williams, please, I have a family, a mortgage. I was just following the captain's lead. I'm sorry, I truly am. His plea was pathetic, but it was the plea of a follower, a man who lacked the moral courage to question authority, even when it was clearly in the wrong. Alani felt a sliver of pity for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his silent complicity, his barely perceptible shake of the head that had affirmed Sterling's prejudice. Your mortgage is not my concern, Mr. Miller, Alani said, her voice devoid of sympathy. Your choices are. You had a choice to speak up, to ask for my ID respectfully, to act like a professional. You chose to stand by and validate your captain's bigotry. Leadership isn't just about the stripes on your shoulder. It's about integrity, especially when it's difficult. You showed none. Finally, she turned to Captain Robert Sterling. The color was returning to his face, but it was a blotchy, furious red. His fear was being replaced by a towering, indignant rage. He was a man who had flown dignitaries and rock stars, a man who saw himself as the sovereign of his silver domain. To be so thoroughly and publicly humbled by her was more than his ego could bear. "This is an outrage," he seethed, taking a step toward her. You people are always looking for a reason to be offended, looking for a handout or a way to claim victimhood." The slur, the ugly insinuation packed into "you people" was the final nail in his professional coffin. Eleni didn't flinch. She stood her ground, calm and immovable. "A handout? Captain, I own this jet. The ground it's parked on is leased by a company I have a majority stake in. The very air you're breathing is being paid for by the hour out of my accounts. The only person looking for a handout here was you, a paycheck you clearly didn't earn." She gestured back toward the FBO. "Your services are no longer required. I suggest you collect your belongings and vacate the premises." Sterling looked from Eleni to the gleaming Gulf Stream, the symbol of a world he had just been violently ejected from. For him, it wasn't just a job. It was his identity. He was Captain Sterling. Without the uniform in the cockpit, who was he? Just a man with an expensive watch and a tarnished reputation. A desperate, wild look entered his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "I'll tell everyone. I'll tell them how you were abusive, how you were looking for a fight. I'll sue you. I'll sue the company. You'll see." "Sue me for what, Captain?" Eleni asked, arching an eyebrow. "For firing you for gross incompetence and blatant discrimination? Be my guest. I have a legal team on a retainer that costs more per year than you'll make in the rest of your life. They'd be delighted to have something to do." Her absolute certainty, her complete lack of fear, seemed to finally break him. The fight went out of his eyes, replaced by a hollow, empty defeat. He stared at her for a long moment, the architect of his own ruin, and then he turned without another word and began the long, shameful walk back to the FBO building. Frank Miller hesitated, then cast one last, pleading look at Eleni before scurrying after his disgraced captain. Bianca Hayes remained frozen for a few seconds longer, tears welling in her eyes, smudging her perfect mascara. The life of curated glamour, of layovers in Paris and shopping in Dubai, had just ended on a cold patch of New Jersey tarmac. She let out a quiet sob, then turned and fled. Eleni stood alone for a moment, watching them go. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a familiar, metallic taste of exhaustion. This wasn't a victory, it was a chore. It was the emotional and mental labor she was so often forced to perform just to exist in her own life. Her assistant, a highly efficient man named George, approached cautiously. "Dr. Williams, is everything handled?" "Yes, George," she sighed. "We'll have a new crew in about an hour. Please call Tokyo and push the meeting back by 2 hours and get me a coffee. Black." "Right away," he said, scurrying off. 90 minutes later, a new crew arrived. They were the picture of professionalism, led by a seasoned captain named Maria Flores, whose handshake was firm and whose eyes were direct and respectful. There was no fawning, no awkward apology, just a crisp, efficient briefing and a sincere, "Welcome aboard, Dr. Williams. We're ready when you are." As Eleni finally ascended the stairs and stepped into the cool, quiet cabin of the G650ER, the scent of fresh leather and polished wood greeted her like an old friend. She sank into her seat, the door swishing shut behind her, sealing her off from the world. The engine spooled up with a low hum, a promise of escape, as the jet taxied and then thundered down the runway, lifting gracefully into the bruised sky. Eleni looked down at the rapidly shrinking airport. She had won. She had asserted her power and vanquished the ignorant. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt a profound sense of unease. Sterling's parting threat, "You'll regret this," echoed in her mind. It was the desperate snarl of a cornered animal, easy to dismiss, but something about his venomous certainty planted a seed of doubt in her mind. She had just fired 3 people, effectively ending their careers in the tight-knit world of private aviation. The story was too dramatic, too compelling, not to leak. And in the court of public opinion, context was often the first casualty. She had protected her dignity and her space, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just ignited a fire, and she had no idea which way the wind was about to blow. The wheels retracted into the belly of the plane, and she was airborne, flying away from the scene of the confrontation. But she was bringing the consequences with her. The 14-hour flight to Tokyo was supposed to be a cocoon of productivity and rest. For the first few hours it was. Ilani reviewed the final points of the merger proposal with Kyoto Innovations, a deal that would make Ethelred Analytics the undisputed global leader in financial AI. She ate a light meal prepared by the new impeccably professional flight attendant and then settled in to get some sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept replaying the scene on the tarmac. Sterling's sneer, Miller's cowardice, Bianca's contempt. It was a familiar poison, but the dose had been unusually high. Halfway over the Pacific, she gave up on sleep and connected to the jet's satellite Wi-Fi, intending to check the markets. That's when she saw it. The storm had broken. It started with a single anonymous post on a popular aviation forum, likely from a sympathetic ground crew member who had witnessed the event. The title was explosive. CEO fires entire Gulfstream crew on tarmac at Teterboro. The post was a skewed third-hand account, filled with inaccuracies but containing a kernel of truth. It painted a picture of an arrogant, unnamed female CEO who threw a tantrum over a minor procedural check and had 3 hardworking crew members summarily executed, professionally speaking. From there, it metastasized. A blogger for a small, gossipy aviation website picked it up, did some digging, and found Ilani's name in the jet's registration. The story was repackaged with a clickbait headline, "Tech Tycoon Ilani Williams in Power Play at Airport." By the time Ilani's jet was descending into Tokyo, the story had been picked up by mainstream news outlets. It was the perfect viral cocktail, a clash of race, class, and power, set against a backdrop of unimaginable luxury. Her photo was everywhere. The professional headshot from her company's website juxtaposed with paparazzi shots of her in casual clothes. Her phone, which had been blissfully silent, exploded with notifications, texts, emails, missed calls. Her PR team was in full-blown crisis mode. The narrative had already split into 2 fiercely opposing camps. On one side, she was a hero. Hashtags like Flying While Black and Boss Move Ilani were trending. Her supporters, a diverse coalition of women, people of color, and those fed up with corporate arrogance, hailed her as an icon. They shared their own stories of discrimination, celebrating her for refusing to tolerate what so many had been forced to endure. She was a symbol of righteous anger, a woman who had finally said, "Enough," but the other side was just as loud and far more vicious. The narrative spun by her detractors, amplified in the dark corners of the internet and by certain cable news pundits, was ugly. They used the same photo but saw a different story. She was an arrogant elitist, a new money diva, a race baiter who used her identity as a weapon. They painted Sterling, Miller, and Bianca as the victims, hardworking Americans crushed by the whims of a volatile billionaire. The comment sections were a cesspool. They attacked her looks, her success, her right to own a jet. They dissected her tracksuit, calling it thuggish, and her confidence, labeling it aggression. When she landed in Tokyo and finally spoke to her head of communications, a woman named Lena, the situation was clear. "We're in a firestorm, Ilani," Lena said, her voice strained. "We can't control the narrative anymore. It has a life of its own." "What's our play?" Ilani asked, walking through the sterile, quiet environment of the private terminal at Haneda Airport. "We have 2 options," Lena explained. "Option 1, total silence. We issue a brief, no comment, and hope it blows over. Option 2, we go on the offensive. We release a statement, tell your side of the story, frame it as a stand against discrimination. We lean into the hero narrative." Ilani thought for a moment, watching the controlled, orderly dance of Japanese ground crews outside the window. Silence felt like weakness, like she had something to hide. "Option 2, she said firmly, write a statement, make it strong. Emphasize that the issue was unprofessional conduct and a failure to follow basic identification protocols. which escalated into clear, undeniable prejudice. This wasn't about my feelings. It was about a fundamental breakdown of professional duty. Got it, Lena said. But Alani, be prepared. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Robert Sterling has lawyered up. The news hit Alani like a jolt of ice water. On what grounds? He's claiming wrongful termination and defamation of character. He's already given an interview to a sympathetic online channel. Lena sent her the link. Alani clicked it, a sense of dread pulling in her stomach. The video showed Robert Sterling, not in his crisp captain's uniform, but in a soft-focus shot, sitting in what looked like a cozy living room, a golden retriever sleeping at his feet. He looked somber, defeated, the very picture of a wrong man. His voice was measured, full of feigned sincerity. I've been a pilot for 30 years, he said, looking directly into the camera. My record is impeccable. My only concern has always been the safety of my passengers. All we did was ask to verify the identity of an individual who didn't match the client profile. It was a simple security check. For that, I lost my livelihood. My name has been dragged through the mud. My family is devastated. He never mentioned race. He didn't have to. The omission was a strategy. He painted himself as a diligent professional and Alani as an unhinged, aggressive woman who flew off the handle at the slightest provocation. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Alani felt a surge of cold fury. He was twisting the truth, weaponizing the very stereotypes he had used against her to now paint himself as the victim. Over the next 48 hours, while Alani was locked in intense, high-stakes negotiations with the board of Kyoto Innovations, the story in the West continued to rage. The statement from her company helped, solidifying support from her allies. But Sterling's interview gave her detractors the ammunition they craved. Bianca Hayes and Frank Miller released their own tearful statements, coached by the same legal team, echoing Sterling's narrative. They were just following procedure. They were afraid. Dr. Williams was intimidating. The word intimidating was chosen with surgical precision. It was a classic dog whistle, a term so often used to describe powerful black women, turning their confidence and authority into a perceived threat. The Japanese executives, paragons of discretion and honor, never mentioned the swirling controversy. Their focus was entirely on the deal, but Alani could feel it, the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere, the way their assistants would whisper when she entered. The story was global. It had followed her across the ocean. She won the negotiation. The deal was tentatively agreed upon, pending final board approvals. It was a monumental achievement, the culmination of 2 years of work. As she shook hands with Mr. Nakamura, the elderly, deeply respected chairman of Kyoto Innovations, he gave her a long, appraising look. Dr. Williams, he said in his quiet, formal English, you are a formidable woman. One must be careful that their strength is not mistaken for the storm that follows them. It was not a compliment. It was a warning. On the flight back to New York, the relief of her business victory was overshadowed by the looming personal battle. She had thought firing the crew was the end of the story. She was beginning to realize it was only the prologue. The consequences were no longer just a hashtag or a news cycle. They were now a formal legal complaint, a public relations war, and a shadow of doubt cast over her professional reputation at the most critical juncture of her career. The karma of her decisive action was beginning to take shape, and it was far more complex and dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The lawsuit arrived via a courier, a thick manila envelope that felt heavier than its contents. It was not a surprise, but seeing it in black and white, the formal language of legal grievance, wrongful termination, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, made it chillingly real. Captain Robert Sterling, joined by Miller and Hayes as co-plaintiffs, was demanding an exorbitant sum in damages, but the money was secondary. Their primary goal was the complete and utter destruction of Alani's public and professional reputation. The suit was filed by a lawyer named Martin Thorne, a man known for his scorched earth tactics and his love of media attention. He wasn't a top-tier corporate litigator. He was a shark who smelled blood in the water of a high-profile case. Thorne immediately went on a media tour, appearing on any network that would have him, painting his clients as humble, Working-class professionals destroyed by the whim of an out-of-control tech billionaire. This isn't about race, Thorne would say, his face a mask of faux sincerity. This is about class. It's about a new breed of untouchable elites who believe the rules don't apply to them. Dr. Williams wanted to make a point, and she was willing to destroy 3 lives to do it. The strategy was insidious and effective. By framing it as a class war, Thorne sidestepped the thorny issue of race, making it more palatable for a wider audience to sympathize with Sterling. Alani's legal team, led by the formidable Catherine Pierce, was unperturbed. "It's a frivolous suit, Alani," Catherine said during a strategy meeting in a sterile glass conference room overlooking Central Park. "It's a shakedown, pure and simple. We have the call recording with Peterson. We have Apex Aviation's full cooperation. They're standing by their decision to terminate based on your complaint. On the legal merits, he doesn't have a leg to stand on." "But it's not about the legal merits anymore, is it?" Alani countered, pacing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. "This is a PR battle being fought in the court of public opinion, and Thorne is a master of that arena." Her instincts were proven correct when the first legal filing from Thorne's office was leaked to the press. It was filled with sensational, baseless claims. It alleged Alani was verbally abusive and physically menacing. It claimed she had a history of erratic behavior with service staff, a complete fabrication they hoped to substantiate by digging for any disgruntled former employee they could find. The most damaging part was how they twisted the central facts. They claimed Alani refused to present her identification when asked, instead immediately escalating the situation by brandishing her phone and making threatening calls. The simple, dignified act of calling the management company was reframed as an act of aggression. The poison was working. Sponsors for a tech conference where Alani was scheduled to be the keynote speaker quietly pulled out. An offer to join the board of a prestigious philanthropic foundation was rescinded, the chairman citing the need to avoid unnecessary controversy. These were small cuts, but they were deep. The most significant blow came from within her own company. Arthur Vance, her CFO, and a man who had been with her from the beginning, requested an urgent meeting. Arthur was the cautious yin to her audacious yang, a man who saw the world in risk assessments and balance sheets. He closed the door to her office, his face grim. "Alani, we have a problem, a big one. It's the Kyoto Innovations deal." Alani's heart sank. "What about it?" "We had a handshake agreement." "The Japanese are getting nervous," Arthur said, sliding a tablet across her desk. It showed a series of translated articles from Japanese financial newspapers. The headlines were more subdued than their American counterparts, but the message was clear. Ethelred, CEO, embroiled in U.S. discrimination scandal. "Their board is extremely conservative," Arthur explained. "They value harmony, discretion, and reputation above all else. A public, messy, mudslinging lawsuit is the exact opposite of how they do business. Mr. Nakamura's son, who is leading the due diligence, has been asking a lot of questions. Not about our financials, but about this media circus." "It's a baseless lawsuit, Arthur. We're going to win." "Winning in court and winning in the boardroom are two different things," he retorted, his voice sharp with anxiety. "They're not worried about the legal outcome. They're worried about brand association. They're about to merge their century-old respected company with a brand that's currently being associated with terms like elitist, abusive, and racial strife. We're becoming a reputational liability. They're threatening to pause the final stages of the merger until this is resolved." This was the karma Alani hadn't anticipated. Not the lawsuit, not the Twitter trolls, but a direct, catastrophic impact on her life's work. The Kyoto deal wasn't just another acquisition. It was her legacy project, a visionary merger that would reshape the industry for decades. And it was being jeopardized by a lie spun by a disgraced pilot on a rainy tarmac. "What do they want?" Alani asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "They want it to go away," Arthur said. "They floated the idea of a settlement. Pay Sterling and his crew off. Make them sign a non-disclosure agreement. Kill the story." Alani felt a visceral wave of revulsion. "Settle? Arthur, are you insane? That's an admission of guilt. I would be paying them for their bigotry. I would be proving their lies were true. Absolutely not. Alani, this is not about pride. Arthur's voice rose, his usual unflappable demeanor cracking. This is about a $60 billion merger. This is about the future of this company, our employees, our shareholders. Sometimes in business, you have to swallow a bitter pill for the greater good. Pay the nuisance fee and let's move on. This is not a nuisance fee. Alani slammed her hand on the polished mahogany desk, making Arthur jump. This is my name, my integrity. What you're calling pride is the very foundation of everything I've built. I did not spend 20 years fighting tooth and nail, overcoming every obstacle and every prejudice to get to this point, only to pay off a man who insulted me and then lied about it. We will not settle. We will fight, and we will win. Arthur stared at her, his face a mixture of frustration and grudging admiration. And what if we win the lawsuit but lose the company, Alani? What if you win your moral victory in an empty room because Kyoto Innovations has walked away? His question hung in the air, a terrifying prophecy. She had made a stand on the tarmac, a righteous, clear-cut decision born of her refusal to be diminished. But that single act had created a butterfly effect, a hurricane of unintended consequences that now threatened to tear down the very empire that gave her the power to make that stand in the first place. The law of karma was proving to be a cruel and intricate accountant, and the bill was coming due in ways she could never have foreseen. She had chosen to fight for her name, but she was beginning to understand that the price of that fight might be everything else. The deposition was held in a soulless conference room at a neutral law firm in downtown Manhattan. The room was beige, the carpet was beige, and the long, polished table reflected the flat, gray light from the overcast sky outside. It was a room designed to strip away emotion, to reduce human drama to a sterile transcript. Alani sat on one side of the table with Catherine Pierce and her legal team. On the other side sat Martin Thorne, his face radiating a smug, predatory confidence. Next to him, Robert Sterling sat stiffly in a suit that was just a little too tight, looking more like a man on trial than a plaintiff. A court stenographer sat at the head of the table, her fingers poised over her machine, ready to capture every word, every sigh, every hesitation. "Let the record show," Thorne began, his voice unctuously smooth, "that this is the sworn deposition of Dr. Alani Williams, taken in the case of Sterling et Oliver Williams and Ethelred Analytics." For the next 7 hours, Thorne subjected Alani to a grueling, meticulous dissection of her life, her career, and every second of the incident at Teterboro. His strategy was clear: to provoke, to fluster, and to paint her as an angry, unreasonable aggressor. He began with her background, his questions laced with subtle insinuations. "You grew up in Inglewood, California, is that correct? A rather tough neighborhood." "It was a vibrant community that taught me resilience," Alani replied coolly, refusing to take the bait. "And you attended Crenshaw High School before receiving a scholarship to Stanford. A remarkable leap. You must have been quite ambitious." The way he said ambitious made it sound like a character flaw. He moved on to her company. "Ethelred Analytics. You built it from the ground up. An aggressive growth model, would you say? You've been involved in several hostile takeovers." "We've been involved in strategic acquisitions that created shareholder value," Catherine interjected smoothly. "Let's stick to the matter at hand, counsel." Thorne smiled, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He had gotten a reaction. He then turned to the day of the flight. "Dr. Williams, what were you wearing when you arrived at the airport?" "A cashmere tracksuit and sneakers." "Not your usual business attire, I imagine. Not the kind of clothing one would expect from the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company about to close a major deal." "I was dressing for a 14-hour flight," Alani said, her jaw tight. "I prioritize comfort." "Or were you, perhaps, dressing to make a statement? To see how far you could push the boundaries of decorum before someone called you on it?" "Objection," Catherine said, her voice sharp. "Assumes facts, not in evidence, and is argumentative." "I'll rephrase," Thorne said, undeterred. "When Captain Sterling approached you, you found his tone to be, what? Disrespectful?" "I found his actions to be discriminatory," Alani corrected. "He and his crew made an assumption based on my race and my attire, and they refused me access to my own property." "But he never mentioned your race, did he, Dr. Williams?" Thorne leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. In fact, no one on that crew said a single word about the color of your skin. Isn't that correct? It is not necessary for someone to use a racial slur to be acting on racial prejudice, Mr. Thorne. It's in the assumptions they make, the dismissiveness of their tone, the disbelief that someone who looks like me could possibly be in a position of power. So it was a feeling you had, Thorne pressed, a subjective interpretation. You felt discriminated against. You didn't have any concrete evidence, just a vibe. He was trying to reduce her lived experience to a flight of fancy, an emotional overreaction. Alani took a slow, calming breath, remembering Catherine's advice. Do not let him get under your skin. He is baiting you. Answer the question asked, and only the question asked. The concrete evidence, Alani said, her voice steady and measured, was being physically blocked from boarding an aircraft I own by a crew I employ, for no reason other than their personal disbelief. The evidence was their refusal to even consider that I might be their client, instead suggesting I was with the catering service. Thorne shifted his line of attack. Let's talk about the phone call to Mr. Peterson at Apex Aviation. You put the call on speakerphone, correct? Yes. Why? Why did you need to humiliate Captain Sterling and his crew in that way? Why not have a private conversation? I wanted them to hear directly from their superior that they were making a grave error. I was hoping to resolve the situation quickly and efficiently. Or were you looking for an audience? Thorne shot back. Were you enjoying the power you held over them? The power to have them reprimanded? To have them fired with a single word? He was relentless, twisting every action, every decision, into a malicious, power-hungry motive. He questioned why she hadn't simply shown her ID immediately. She explained that the situation had escalated beyond a simple ID check. It had become a matter of principle. He portrayed this as arrogance. He asked if she had ever raised her voice. She admitted her frustration had become evident. He painted this as a rage-filled tirade. Sterling watched it all, his expression a mixture of vindication and discomfort. He avoided Alani's gaze, focusing instead on his lawyer's performance. He was a passenger on this ride now, his fate in the hands of a man who was expertly weaving a tapestry of lies around a single ugly thread of truth. The final hour was the worst. Thorne produced grainy security footage from a distant airport camera. It was silent, shot from a high angle, showing 4 indistinct figures on the tarmac. This is you and the crew, is it not, Dr. Williams? Thorne asked. It appears to be. Please describe for me what is happening here. He pointed to a moment where Alani gestured with her hand while speaking. Is this you, as my clients have stated, becoming irate and waving your hands in Captain Sterling's face? No, Alani said firmly. I am explaining that my assistant has my documentation. It looks quite aggressive from this angle, doesn't it? Thorne mused. One could see how a person might feel threatened. Objection, Catherine snapped. Counsel is testifying. But the damage was done. The video, stripped of context and sound, could be interpreted in any way Thorne wanted to spin it. It was a Rorschach test, and he was telling the jury what to see. When it was finally over, Alani felt boneless, utterly drained. She had maintained her composure, pairing Thorne's attacks with cold, hard facts. But the process itself was a form of punishment. She had been forced to defend her own reality, to justify her own existence under oath for 7 straight hours. As they packed their briefcases, Catherine gave her a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. You did perfectly, Alani. You were unshakable. But as Alani looked across the table, she saw Martin Thorne lean over and whisper something to Robert Sterling. Sterling broke into a wide, triumphant grin. It was the first time she had seen him smile. It was a chilling, predatory expression, the look of a man who believed, against all evidence, that he was going to win. And in that moment, Alani understood that the deposition was not about finding the truth. It was about creating a version of it that a jury could be convinced to buy. The victory in the deposition felt Pyrrhic. Alani had held her own, refusing to be broken or baited by Thorne's relentless attacks. Catherine Pierce and her team were confident they had strengthened their legal position, showcasing Alani as a credible, composed witness against the fabricated narrative of an out-of-control tyrant. But the war was being fought on 2 fronts, and the battle for public perception was taking a devastating toll. The leaked snippets from the deposition, selectively edited transcripts provided to friendly media outlets by Thorne's office, were brutal. Williams admits to frustration on tarmac. CEO refuses to say she wasn't intimidating. Grainy video shows heated confrontation. Each headline was a fresh cut, bleeding out the context and leaving only the stain of controversy. The legal process, designed to uncover truth, was being expertly manipulated to obscure it. The real blow, however, landed not in a courtroom or on a news blog, but in a sterile, silent video conference call. It was with the full board of Kyoto Innovations. Mr. Nakamura, the venerable chairman, was not present. In his place was his son, Kenji Nakamura, a younger, Harvard-educated executive with a reputation for ruthless pragmatism. The call was brief. Kenji, his face an impassive mask on the large screen in Alani's boardroom, got straight to the point. "Dr. William," he began, dispensing with the usual pleasantries, "we have been observing the ongoing legal and media situation in the United States with great concern. It is the board's consensus that the volatility surrounding you, and by extension, Ethelred Analytics, represents an unacceptable level of reputational risk for our stakeholders." Arthur Vance, sitting beside Alani, shifted nervously. He knew what was coming. "While we still believe in the strategic synergy between our two companies," Kenji continued, his voice flat and final, "we cannot move forward with the merger at this time. The potential for brand damage is too significant. Therefore, Kyoto Innovations is officially withdrawing its offer and terminating all negotiations, effective immediately." The words hit the silent boardroom with the force of a physical impact. $60 billion. 2 years of relentless work, of late nights and early mornings, of navigating complex international regulations and cultural divides. Her legacy, gone, erased in a 30-second statement because of a lie told by a bigot. Alani felt a strange, hollow calm settle over her. The worst had happened. The fear she had been holding at bay had materialized. Arthur's prophecy had come true. "Kenji-san," Arthur stammered, his face pale, "I urge you to reconsider. This lawsuit is a temporary distraction. We are confident of a full vindication." "Our decision is final, Mr. Vance," Kenji said, cutting him off. "We wish you and Dr. Williams the best in your future endeavors." And with a polite, almost imperceptible bow of his head, his screen went black. Silence. The hum of the building's HVAC system seemed deafening. Alani stared at the blank screen, seeing the reflection of her own face, her expression unreadable. "Alani, Arthur began, his voice choked with a mixture of grief and frustration. I told you to settle. We could have avoided this. We could have paid the damn fee and this deal would be closing right now." The accusation, though unspoken, was clear. "This is your fault. Your pride cost us everything." Alani slowly turned her head to look at him, her eyes dark and weary. "And what would the company be worth, Arthur? If its leader could be blackmailed into silence? If our integrity could be bought for a few $1,000,000? What kind of foundation is that to build a global powerhouse on?" "A very profitable one," Arthur shot back, his composure finally shattering. "We're a business, Alani, not a social justice movement. Your name might be cleared in a courtroom a year from now, but the deal is dead today. The stock is going to plummet when this news breaks. We've lost." He was right, of course. From a purely financial standpoint, he was absolutely, devastatingly right. Her stand for her principles had come with a price tag of $60 billion. It was a staggering sum, an amount of money that was almost abstract in its immensity. She stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city 20 floors below. The endless river of yellow cabs, the tiny figures of people hurrying along the sidewalks, each with their own battles, their own compromises, their own price. She had always believed that doing the right thing and doing the smart thing were the same. Her entire career was built on that premise, that integrity and success were inextricably linked. For the first time, she was faced with the devastating possibility that she was wrong. This was the true karma. It wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't the public scorn. It was this quiet, catastrophic failure. The consequence of her action wasn't a punishment from some cosmic force. It was the cold, hard logic of the world she operated in, a world that valued a quiet lie over a messy truth. Robert Sterling had lost his job, but in a way he had won. He had set out to make her regret her decision, and he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. He had not only tarnished her name, he had managed to strike a mortal blow against her life's work. He had made her powerful choice seem like a foolish one. "Leave me alone for a while, Arthur," she said softly, her back still to him. She heard him hesitate, then the soft click of the door closing behind him. She was alone with her principals, in a boardroom that suddenly felt like a mausoleum for a future that would never be. The view from the top had never seemed so lonely or so painfully clear. The price of her name, she now knew, was the empire she had built to make that name mean something in the first place. The months that followed were a grueling war of attrition. The lawsuit ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. Galvanized by the loss of the Kyoto deal, Alani's legal team went on the offensive. The turning point came when the first officer, Frank Miller, crumbling under legal pressure, recanted his story in a sworn statement, corroborating every detail of Alani's account. His defection shattered the plaintiff's case. Faced with certain defeat, a disgraced Robert Sterling and Bianca Hayes withdrew their lawsuit. Their karma was swift, blacklisted and unemployable. Their careers in aviation were finished. Alani's victory was quiet and profoundly bittersweet. Her name was cleared, but the $60 billion deal was gone forever, a ghost in her boardroom. Months later, she stood on the Teterboro tarmac again, ascending the stairs to her Gulfstream. A new professional crew greeted her. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Williams." As the jet climbed into the sky, she didn't work. She simply looked out the window, reflecting on the ordeal. She had been right to fire them. To have done otherwise would have been a betrayal of her own integrity. But she'd learned a brutal lesson. Being right doesn't erase the loss. The world had demanded a price for her principles, and the cost was catastrophic. She had lost an empire to save her name. Yet as the plane leveled off, she felt a sense of calm. She hadn't landed the deal of a lifetime, but she had achieved a different kind of landing, not into a larger fortune, but into a deeper, unshakable understanding of herself. And in that, she found a quiet, solitary peace. So what is the real lesson in Alani's story? It's not just a simple tale of a boss firing a disrespectful crew. It's a story about the complex, messy nature of karma. The crew faced the immediate and devastating consequences of their actions, their careers destroyed by a single moment of prejudice. But Alani faced a different kind of karma, a painful blowback that cost her a legacy-defining deal and forced her to question the very price of her principles. Was she right to stand her ground, even knowing it would cost her a fortune? Is a moral victory worth a $60 billion loss? This story shows that in the real world, actions have ripples we can't predict, and the cost of doing the right thing can sometimes be impossibly high. What would you have done in her position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more stories that make you think. Your support is what allows us to keep telling them.